All right, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about a great movie I just saw. Quentin Tarantino's eighth film, The Hateful Eight, starring primarily Kurt Russell, Samuel L. Jackson, Jennifer Jason Leigh, with a healthy dose of one of my favorite TV actors. That's right, Boyd Crowder from Justified himself, Walter Goggins. This movie is set in somewhere in the 1860s in probably late 1860s in Wyoming during a blizzard, most of it just in a single room. There are some side characters here and there, but the main focus is Kurt Russell, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Walter Goggins, and Samuel L. Jackson. The characters, none of them are protagonists. This is an ensemble film, but you'll also find that there isn't really any good guys. You could argue that Kurt Russell is a very principled character. He's known as the Hangman, a bounty hunter who, no matter what the contract says, dead or alive, brings his targets to the Hangman's door. And that's where we have a killer with $10,000 on her head, which is a mint in 1860. Jennifer Jason Leigh, who is such a vile and inhuman and very primal and visceral character in this movie. Some people are going to want to criticize this movie because several of the characters just beat the ever-living hell out of her at points, especially early on in this film. But I assure you that she's no damsel getting taken advantage of. She is a killer, and the movie is centered around her trying to escape and the mystery of who else among the 8 people, or 9 people, or maybe even 10 or 11, depending on the mystery as you're trying to figure out who's in this cabin and who's who, how many of these people are on her side, because it's very clear that somebody's trying to break her out of her fate, which is to get her sent to the gallows. Samuel L. Jackson plays a character that you might find very cool and you might think he's righteous. He's incredibly racist, but as a black war veteran in 1860 who was dealing with the Civil War, you feel he's a bit justified until you learn more about him and you realize that Samuel L. Jackson's character, like virtually every other member of the Hateful Eight, is a sick and twisted fuck. The core theme of this movie is violence and, yes, hatred. But the racism stuff plays a backdoor really to just how sick and fucking violent and primal these characters are. The theme of violence in that these people are in a life and death situation. They don't know who's trying to kill them or who they have to kill to get out of this cabin in a blizzard in the middle of nowhere alive is really intense. Kurt Russell has a lot of control over the situation. He's obviously a very wise and talented bounty hunter who's trying to protect himself and make sure nobody gets their hands on Jennifer Jason Leigh. And he has an early on alliance with Samuel L. Jackson, who you find out is basically a character who's unlike the Hangman, who's always just trying to bring people to justice. And he's got Jennifer Jason Leigh chained to his arm, which is also one of the many symbols of isolation and being trapped and imprisoned that this movie has, as it all takes place in a single location, except for some parts here and there. Boyd Crowder himself, Walter Goggins, plays a character who used to be a member of a rebel militia who's painfully racist, and yet, just like how every one of these characters is obviously a killer, a subhuman monster, essentially, they all have these qualities that draw you to them. And even as they're introduced to you and you look at this fuck and you say, there's nothing redeemable in this person. And then you are forced to watch them show humanity before more violence happens. So you can't stay on top of this film. The score is mournful and full of dread and just excellently done. The sound in this movie is great. You're able to follow every whisper, the background noises, boots on wood, rustle of chains, clops of horses through snow, and just all the sound. And you will just keep getting thrown off because there's not any jump scares, but you probably will be jumping out of your seats at the deafening loudest gunshots ever committed to film, my ears are still ringing, that just truly punctuate those most animal moments of this film. Where, because some people are going to tell you this film is a Western, or it's a drama, or it's a suspenseful whodunit type thriller. I would contend personally that if there is a genre that this very difficult to categorize movie fits into, it is a horror film. This has sort of a structure very similar to a slasher movie. Who lives and who dies is the question going on in your brain. And it's not really a spoiler. You know it's a Tarantino film. The other great big star of this movie is the cinematography. This is primarily shot in a rare form of film that was only used for some epics like Ben-Hur back in the 60s. It's a 70 millimeter panoramic film. What that essentially means is you're seeing an incredibly wide and highly detailed visuals. Almost everything's always in focus that really makes you feel like you're there. If you've ever kind of noticed when you're watching virtually every film, the focus comes in on certain characters and can refocus to stuff in the background and back and forth. This movie, you're seeing it all, and except for a few moments where it's artistically appropriate to blur, kind of have the focus on something in the foreground rather than the background, you're able to really just pay attention to this tremendously wide angle shots that really underscore the bleakness of the surrounding, as you can just see miles and miles and miles of horizon and realize that these people are trapped in the middle of nowhere. But it also kind of at times has a very retro feel, but it's very clear that the film quality can shift from holy shit, this is going to give me a seizure, like gnarly crack and popple and the tear mark, I don't know the exact words for that, old film style, and even a crazy kind of like shift in light focus to occasionally at more intense and dialogue focused moments it looks more like real digital film. But it's incredibly unique. You have not seen a film that looks like this film. And the set design and the blocking structure of what happens is great. You're able to pay attention. You don't ever feel overwhelmed by the number of characters. And at times you can see things going on in the background, and that adds to the suspense where you're going, should I be looking at the focused on characters? Should I be looking at Jennifer Jason Leigh, or should I be looking at Tim Roth in the background, or Michael Madsen? What are they doing? What about Bruce Dern, who plays a old rebel army general from the South who just seems like a totally sick fuck, but just like every other character has his moments where you're forced to see him as a human being with nuance, when you think, what a tremendous racist, this is like Alabama Hitler right here. Well, no. These characters are at once animals and entirely human. And dread, brutal violence, and gore that would make Django Unchained and Inglourious Bastard blush. The dialogue is great. It's not exactly the highest point of Tarantino's writing, but the dialogue doesn't really have the same focus as it does in Pulp Fiction and in Kill Bill. How would I rate this movie among Tarantino films? Well, I wouldn't say it's quite as good as Inglourious Basterds. It's better than Django Unchained, in my opinion. It's, of course, very different from those films, with only that core violence and rage and revenge theme to it being similar between these movies. Every character, especially Samuel L. Jackson, gives an amazing performance, and you wouldn't even recognize Jennifer Jason Leigh. You'd think she's more like Gollum than a beautiful up-and-coming actress. And even though this movie is eternally long, over 3 hours, complete with an overture at the beginning, there were no previews to this movie. It's just bang, overture, bang, movie. It was a mindfuck. And there's a little intermission in the middle with a little bit of a kind of meta recap immediately after the intermission to get you back in the groove, because I guarantee you went off to pee and or smoke or get food or go to the concession stand, which I wouldn't recommend when Star Wars is playing in like 5 theaters at this joint. But I did not feel the length of this movie. I never felt like it was taking too long. I didn't really anticipate when it was reaching a conclusion. This movie is full of surprises and just in-your-face moments that will shock you and chill you and make you laugh and make you freak the fuck out and cringe, but you'll always be on the edge of your seat. This is an absolutely fantastic must-see film. It'll be on a lot of top 10 lists of 2015. It's great. It's Tarantino. It's fantastic. It's got everything you want and everything you expect from one of his films. And the innovation that he's had in all his recent movies is there. He's constantly adding something new. This is not tired. It's not old. It's not Mr. Blonde and Mr. Pink and everybody arguing over the table, but it is dialogue-driven, character-driven, very focused, small-scale, high-violence film. I recommend it wholeheartedly, kind of a 4 out of 5 stars type deal. It's not perfect, it's not transcendent, but it is watchable, and it is a must-see. Thanks for watching.